Planning is where you problem solve. Planning is where you step back and prioritize. Planning is where you identify opportunities to delegate. Planning is where you can set up systems. Planning is where you set realistic expectations for yourself and for your patients and for your suppliers, for your family. Stop doing and just step back and plan.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Len Tao. And first off, I want to thank my sponsors, both Dental and Tel and the Doc sites, for their support, allowing me to come to your inbox every week, Fridays at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As business owners, as dental practice owners, we are very at times overwhelmed. And I had a woman who had listened to one of my episodes reach out to me and said, "Hey, I want to be in your podcast. I can teach you how to gain more control, how to not feel overwhelmed." So I'm really excited to have Mridu Parikh from Life is Organized on the Raving Patients Podcast. If you're looking to gain 10 hours a week in your business, I want you to raise the volume and listen up to this episode. So ready to wake up with a plan that works? Then you need Mridu on speed dial. Overwhelmed business owners work with Mridu to focus and systematize so they can take control of their demands and distractions at work and at home. She is passionate about getting experts the results they want, whether it's doubling their revenue, saving 20 hours a week, or losing pan sizes. Mridu is a productivity coach and founder of Life is Organized, host of the Productivity on Purpose podcast, and author of the bestseller, Accomplish It. So please welcome to the Raving Patients Podcast, Mridu Parikh. Mridu, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me and for nailing my name as you work so hard on it, because I know it's not easy. So I'm excited about our conversation today.
Well, I'm excited to have you, and thank you for reaching out. I have a lot of people that reach out to me because I have a fairly popular podcast, and they're like, "This is what we want to talk about." I'm like, "Yeah, that's not interesting to me, so I don't have them on." and you know, my podcast is not only, it's business related. It's geared towards dentists, but anybody can listen to it. So I felt that this was a very interesting topic to discuss because I'm sure you know, there's many dentists who own practices and they're overwhelmed. Just Monday this week, I went to a dental practice, down in South Florida where I live. And she's a mother. She's a business owner. She obviously runs a practice. She's got 10 team members. And she is completely overwhelmed 4 years into ownership. She bought a practice and it's very difficult for her to find the time that she needs to do everything. So, this is a core problem that I see quite often when talking to dentists, is that it's an overwhelming. And being a former dental practice owner myself, I don't know if you know, I retired in December. I practiced for 23 years and I owned a practice for 15. Unless you know how to use your time really efficiently, you can get overwhelmed very quickly. So I'm really excited to ask you some questions on this topic, find out how you can help practice owners or business owners in general. So I'm glad to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm excited to jump in because I think you're right. All business owners, it's overwhelming, no matter what field, especially as practice owners. So yeah, let's jump in.
So I think the best thing to do to start off with, and this isn't meant to be a sales pitch, but I'm curious. Tell me how you help business owners. What do you do with them to make them feel less overwhelmed, to find 20 hours in a week? Talk to me about that first before we jump into more of the content part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things we're going to do is get clarity. You really get focused on what is it that you want. And I find that that's sometimes the hardest thing for people to answer because we usually know what we don't want. I don't want to be working this hard. I don't want to be working this many hours. But what do you want? How do you want your practice to look? How many employees do you want? How many, different offices do you want? Really, what do you want? How do you want to see your life? Because I think we have to really start there and set that vision, because then we can reverse engineer and get you there. But I think often you're just sort of, as I'm a business owner, I know sometimes it's just like you're just going day by day, like just trying to survive. We're not even thinking about the big picture. We've gotten so lost in the minutia and the details and just, grasping on each day to get through it that we've sort of lost sight of that. So that's the first place we're going to start. And then after that, then there's just a series of different areas. I have like 5 pillars we go through to get there, right? So that's kind of the first thing is create the goals, create the vision. And then we're going to start do a deep dive into your schedule and your calendar and say like, well, what are some of the changes we can make that are really quick? Like, I'm just like, what are the quick wins that are the tweaks we can make to help you get to some of those goals? Then we'll look at some systems and processes, because we know you can have the goals, you can have it on your calendar, but if you don't have systems behind it, it's all going to fall apart. So we'll take a look there. And then the next part is we will talk about your team and delegation. So what does that look like? Again, you could do the first 3 steps right, but if you're holding on to everything and you're being a control freak, is only that far you're going to get. And then lastly, we're taking into account your boundaries and communication. So, again, you could do all the 4 steps before that, but if you can't communicate what you want and if you can't uphold your boundaries, it's also going to fall apart. So that's kind of the process that I'll take my clients through. And that is sort of like this cohesive way of looking at your life. And by the way, it's not just your business life, but your home life. Like you mentioned, your client, she's a mother, right? A lot of us are parents, spouses, we're taking care of elderly parents. It's like, how do we look at our whole life holistically to make it work?
Got it. That makes sense. I'm very, very efficient with my time. I don't live a stress-free life. I'm busy. I travel a lot, but I really have my efficiency locked down. I can multitask really well. But you said a couple of things which really resonated with me. One was setting goals, and I'm a huge goal setter. I teach goal setting. I think it's really, really important. My calendar is how everything runs. I have everything on my calendar. Everything's time blocked. Everything's set aside. And if there isn't time there, they can't schedule the time because my schedule will fall apart. So those 2 things resonated with me. And I think those are, like you said, the first 2 things you mentioned was you have to have those things set up properly. I don't have much of a team, but I do delegate. And in my dental practice, I delegated really well. And that's why my practice ran really well, because I gave away a lot of the micromanaging that I was doing and I empowered the team to do their work, and I didn't micromanage them, and we ran a better business because of it. So a lot of the things you just said really resonated well with me. And it's probably why I'm successful, because I do a lot of those things you mentioned.
Yeah, no, 100%. And also delegating just, doesn't mean you have to have a big team. You could have one person, and we can also delegate at home. If you're married, if you have a lawn keeper, a housekeeper, right? Like there's so many ways. I think that delegation also kind of gets a bad name because people think, oh, I have to have this big team. No, you don't, not at all.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. So let's jump into the content here. So I think the first thing we want to talk about was what's the core problem you've encountered with time with people, and why should the people listening to this and viewing this podcast care about that?
Yeah. So we kind of almost just touched on it. So I think, a lot of business owners, they think, I'm a natural born procrastinator, or I have ADD, which some may, but it's sort of like this self-proclaimed issue right now, right? Or it gets so bad sometimes you're so overwhelmed, you are so overloaded and overextended. Then the worst thing is you start losing confidence and you start feeling like maybe I'm not even cut out for this, right? Maybe I'm not even supposed to be a business owner. And I think that actually the real issue that whether all of those problems stem from is the lack of clarity, right? Lack of clarity and focus. So kind of what we were just saying, like what do you want? Like what is it that you really want every day? Because we spend so much time spinning your wheels and then not making decisions. So when you're not clear and you're not focused, you're sitting in this indecisiveness. And this has really deep consequences that people don't realize. Like sometimes we think, okay, yeah, you recognize you're not making a decision, or you don't know where to, and that could be as small as or simple as, I don't know where to put my time and energy next today. Like what's my top priority, right? Or something really a lot bigger, like what's my business model going to be? Or, what's my pricing structure going to be? And we all do this, right? We end up wasting days, weeks, months of time and energy on it, right? You're either not taking action because you're confused, or you're procrastinating, or you're perfecting something so much only to go and then question yourself, is this really the right move? Right. And so to me, all of it comes, people think it's like I said, I'm not good with my time, but truly I think it's, you're not focused, or you don't have the clarity that you need.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. Again, being someone who ran a business, I understand a lot of the things you said, but another thing really resonated me with and those who know me know that I'm all about taking action. Because if you don't take action, I give seminars all the time, and I talk about how education without action is just entertainment. And when I give a seminar, I want people to take action. I want them to go home and do the things I talk about, because if not, they can't actually see any different results. If you do the same thing all the time, you're going to get the same results. If you want different results, you've got to consider different behaviors. So I'm all about taking action. So that word really resonated with me, is taking action. So can you kind of go back throughout your personal experiences that made you realize how important a problem this is for businesses? Because I think, with any type of problem that a business has or a person has, whether they have an alcohol problem, whether they have, other addictions, unless they recognize they have a problem, there's no way they can fix it. So how does someone realize they have an issue and know they have to fix it?
For me personally, I started doing what I'm doing today, which is the productivity coaching and training about 7 years ago. But prior to that, I was in home organizing. I was a professional home organizer. So there's a lot of overlap, I guess, between the organizing and productivity. But that was still a very different business. It was home organizing in people's houses. And this is productivity coaching with business owners. And when I was thinking about making that transition, it was really hard because I had spent years building up that first business, right? And so it took me, like, no joke, 18 months that I was just in this gray zone, this kind of gray area of, am I organizing? Am I doing productivity? Am I doing both? Am I doing, and that impacted so many things in terms of my marketing, how I'm introducing myself, my positioning, my pricing, my model, it was just everything. And it's so much muddled. My brain was always muddled, and that's what would keep me up at night. And that's what would, it would slow down my decision-making process. It would slow down the actions, right? Because then you're like, well, where do I put my energy today? Right? It comes back down to that very micro level of, what am I doing today? And so it wasn't until I could really put a stake in the ground and recognize that this is like holding me back, until I could put a stake in the ground and say, no, I'm 100% out of this. And this is where I'm focusing. This is where all my attention goes. And that is when it truly, I mean, I can't say it was overnight, but when it did happen, it was like a snap of a finger in terms of the growth in my business, in my mindset, in my health, even in my relationships and my networking, because I became so clear. So that was me personally. But I would say for others, where do you have that area, that gray zone? Where do you have that like muddled feeling? Where do you have that, like, I don't know, I'm just so confused all the time. I keep going back and forth on this. I think I made a decision, right? Maybe they come to one of your seminars and are taking the action. And then a week later, you're like, oh no, but maybe I should be doing the other thing, right? That's what happens a lot. We get really excited and motivated when we hear something, you take action, and then you fall back into your habits, but it's really because you're not clear what I should be doing. So I think that's the key indicator for anybody when you're feeling that like ambiguity or that confusion.
Got it. No, that makes a whole lot of sense. It really does. So I'm curious, we're talking about things related to time management. What's the most common misconception that someone has about managing their time, and why is that problematic?
Okay. So glad you asked. So when people think that when they're overwhelmed, right? Practice managers are really overwhelmed and they have 100 demands on their plate, and there's so many people in places vying for their attention. And it feels like the natural thing to do is to put all your action towards it, right? You're like, let me move as fast as possible. Let me knock off as many things as I can. Let me like cross everything off the list. Like just go, 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 go. And the issue with this is that people are not really addressing the problem, because here's the thing. You and I both know, right? As business owners, or you were a business owner, that the to-do list isn't necessarily getting shorter, right? Even though you're crossing things off, there are just more and more tasks and more emails and more requests and more things just being thrown at you all the time. So although the doing feels really good in the moment, and it feels like, well, if I'm busy, then I must be really productive. If that were true, here's the question. If that were true, why do we all have days that when you're working 10 hours straight, like from morning till night, you're doing all the things for all the people, you're crossing everything off the list, and then you can still turn around and feel like, I got nothing done today, right? Like, isn't that like, people feel like that all the time? I talk to business owners all the time. They're like, I don't even know, I'm just spinning. And because you're just doing and you're not focused on the right things, the things that really make you feel successful and the things that are truly moving the needle on your goals, like professionally and personally. So instead of focusing on doing, you want to focus on planning. It's like one of the most critical lessons that I work with my clients is teaching them and having them embrace like this mantra. I don't need more doing. I need more planning, because planning is where you problem solve. Planning is where you step back and prioritize. Planning is where you identify opportunities to delegate. Planning is where you can set up systems. Planning is where you set realistic expectations for yourself and for your patients and for your suppliers and for your family. So I think to me, that is the biggest issue is the stop the doing and just step back and plan.
God, I think Yoda has something that says there is no, try. There is no try. You must do. So I think you have to do things. I really do. And I think planning is a big part of that. So now, someone listening to this obviously is going to recognize that they're overwhelmed and they don't have time to accomplish things during their day. So I'm curious, do you have any tangible, actionable tips or suggestions that someone can do immediately that they can implement to start addressing some of their time management issues?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of sticking with the idea of planning, practice owners are wearing all the hats in their businesses, are overwhelmed by all these demands and distractions. There's so much going on in your brain that they're definitely at risk of details falling through the cracks, which I'm imagining people who are listening are like, yes, it's happening to me, right? Or you're potentially missing out on some big opportunity, whether it's whatever, financially or operationally in some way, right? So it is imperative that you're constantly prioritizing and planning your day accurately, which means actually plan your day. You mentioned that you do this, but I'm going to tell you for the most, 98% of people out there, and definitely for business owners, you can plan and plan and plan all day long, but we don't stick to it, right? We don't stick to the plan, or you have 10 things on your calendar and you only get through 3. And then you feel like, oh, I suck at this. I can never actually get through my plan. I can never do it for real. So my top tip is pick your top 3. That's it. Your top 3 priorities of the day. Because by the way, you also have appointments and you have clients and you have calls and you have a million other things already on there. So what are the top 3 given the time that you have? So not the top 3 that you think are the most important necessarily, you'd love to get done that day, but what are the top 3 that you'd love to get done that is realistic within the time frame that you have? That means actually looking at your calendar and mathematically seeing, okay, I only have an hour and a half or 2 hours or 3 hours or 30 minutes today. What can I realistically get done in there? Because the reason we plan, there's 2 reasons we fail planning so much. Is one, there's something called the planning fallacy. And that's the belief that the things you do in the future aren't going to take as long as things you've already completed. So you think oh, I've already done that several times. The next time I'll be more efficient at it. And it's just not true. It's still going to probably take you the same amount of time. And the second thing is optimism bias. So you're so optimistic, it leads you to believe that it's unlikely that you're going to run into any issues that cause delays in the future, which we all know doesn't happen either. So we try to cram in, because of these 2 things, we're cramming in 10 different things in one day when really maybe 2 or 3 in between everything else is realistic, right? And it doesn't matter how many years you've been doing this or how smart you are or how many degrees you have or how ambitious you are, you're going to underestimate how long things really take until you start really looking at this in a more realistic way and understanding that there is a gap between what I think I can get done and what I can actually get done.
I think we talked about goal setting in the beginning. I think, I'm sure you're aware of things called SMART goals. And if you set SMART goals, which are relevant and they're time sensitive, but they're achievable, you have to be understanding what you can and can't accomplish, like you just said. So I think that, again, that ties hand in hand with what you just spoke about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So specifically with dental practice owners, I think the biggest thing is how can practice owners make time and space for these priorities that they set up when they're juggling dozens of projects and people? I mean, look, you have patients you're juggling, you have team members you're juggling, you have home life juggling. What's the best way for them to make time and space in these hugely busy schedules they have?
There is a level of, how I mentioned at the beginning, of, systemizing, automating, delegating, right? You want to be able to be in your genius zone, the things that you can do best. And that does require you to plan, right? To sort of look outside of here's my to-do list. Well, how can I do this in a way that's more efficient? It's the best use of my time. So that takes a little bit of work for sure, and some insight and possibly partnering with someone. However, in the interim, in the very where you're what can I do immediately today, tomorrow, is start with your number 1 priority and create a non-negotiable power. I call it power hour. So whether that hour is 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the evening, 1 hour full first before you start your patients, 1 hour at lunch. Like, you got to figure it out. And if you're ambitious and you're committed to your priorities, you will figure it out because you're creative and you're smart and you will, right? And so if you're committed to it, you'll figure out that way. And you put that 1 hour every day, hell or high water, that's it for your most important priority. That's 5 hours a week. That's 20 hours a month. So just ask yourself, what could I do? What impact could I make? What results could I get if I put 20 focused, deliberate, intentional hours towards any goal in my life, whether it was personally or professionally, and stick to that versus let me have my hands in 20 different things a day, get nothing done, get nothing 100%, nothing is in flow. And you will just see the needle move so much faster than you have in probably the whole year, prior.
Interesting. Okay. So what's the one big takeaway or mind shift that you hope listeners will realize after listening to the episode?
Yeah. So like we mentioned, you're wearing all the hats in your business. You're overwhelmed by all these demands and distractions. And that number one reason you're falling behind is that lack of clarity. Like, you're unclear about, what do I focus on now? What do I focus on tomorrow? Or even like today, right? You're unclear about what to say yes to, what to say no to, unclear about boundaries or how to set expectations. So learning how to get that clarity, learning how to get focused is key to getting unstuck and stop wasting your time and energy. And when you do this, you can truly shave off and, save that 10 hours a week while making a greater impact and making more money, right? If you could get 2 hours back in your day by having that clarity, knowing where to put things, knowing where to put the boundaries, creating those systems, what would you do with that? How could your business just explode? And also, just how could you take better care of yourself instead of running ragged, right? And how can you then show up as a better CEO, a better manager, a better spouse, a better, daughter, son? So, I'd say the biggest mindset shift here is it's not all doing. It's much more about planning and getting focused.
Got it. So I know in the beginning, I asked you to kind of talk about how you help dentists or business owners with things, but I just want to go back to that for a second. So somebody who is listening to this, they realize they have time issues. They're overwhelmed. They want to find more time in their day. They want to, they want to learn to just kind of relax and not have to stress out in their daily lives. Talk about how you work with them. Is it just like Zoom coaching? Go over that process? I'm curious.
Yeah. So I tell my clients, I'm going to be all up in your business in a good way, but meaning like we're going to get really close because it is one-on-one, very personal, very customized. So there's not a cookie cutter anything. We're going to get on the phones. We can do Zoom phone calls, but it's every week and there's full accountability. So if you're someone, because I hear all the time, people are like, I know what to do, but I just need someone to hold me accountable. So that's part of my job, is not only to help you understand some of the key principles and see how it would work and customize it into your life and practice, but also here to say, hey, did you do that? Or let's decide, what are you going to work on this week? And by the way, if you have any questions or challenges, I don't want you to wait for a whole week. So text me, call me, email me in between. I'm yours the whole time. So it's like I'm an accountability coach, with, coaching on what to do. And we're talking through best practices to make sure it really works for you.
Okay. That makes sense. So we're going to switch gears here a little bit, but is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we switch to the Q&A?
One other thing I'd say is that it is natural to feel overwhelmed as a business owner, and you're not alone. And I think for me, one of the hardest things to see with business owners is that it really chips away. And I mentioned this earlier, it chips away at your self-confidence and your self-esteem. And you start, you go into something so excited about it, and then you can go, spend some time in it in your business and then feel completely deflated or defeated. And I just hate that. I just hope that everyone knows, like, you're not alone. There is part of it that is very normal. It's part of the entrepreneurial journey and cycle, but that at the same time, it doesn't have to be this hard. Like, there is a way out. There is support you can get. It doesn't have to be with me. It can be with anybody, but don't do it alone, because you shouldn't have to feel like you're on an island. There are so much great support out there. So just take advantage of it.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. So the content was great. We'll get your contact information. I know you have something to offer to the listeners and viewers, but I'm going to switch gears now. For the next few minutes, we're going to go over this Q&A, lightning round Q&A. The point of this is I'm going to ask you a very easy question, and I want you to come up with whatever comes first. Just say it. You don't have to go into long, drawn-out answers here. This is lightning round stuff, okay? So question number one, and it's all business related for those that haven't heard this yet. What mindsets have helped make you successful?
I am valuable. Whatever I know, it is valuable to someone out there.
What business related book has inspired you the most? Or in other words, what is your favorite book?
It's hard for me to pick one, but I'll tell you the latest one I'm reading because I love it. And it's called Be Seen by Jen Gottlieb.
Be Seen by Jen Gottlieb. I'll have to write that down. Be Seen by Jen Gottlieb. Okay. Who do you look to for advice or mentorship?
There's so many people that I follow. So I'm going to say one of my favorite is Marie Forleo. She's my OG.
Okay. What have you learned from the most successful person you know?
That your mind is your thoughts are everything. Everything starts in the mind and everything starts with your thoughts.
I'm curious about this one. Describe Mondays for you in one word.
Exciting.
Most people say complicated, busy, so you're an organizer, so it probably isn't that busier than any other day you have. So, what is one thing that doesn't add value to your life, but you still do it?
Probably scrolling social media.
Okay. How did you gain credibility so quickly?
Getting myself out there in visibility, a lot of different avenues of visibility.
Okay. What about the future in your business are you most excited about?
I think just growing my audience and again, growing visibility, just impacting more people.
If you had one piece of advice for someone who's just starting out, what would it be?
Do it scared. You're going to be scared. You're going to be fearful and you're going to suck, but do it anyway.
What distracts you the most every day?
My own thoughts.
All right. I was going to ask you this during, but I knew it may be a question to come up with. How do you capture and keep track of ideas? Do you keep a notebook? Do you have voice memos? Do you have to-do lists?
I do to-do lists. And one of my favorites right now is it's a to-do list calendar combined called Sunsama, Sunsama.
Sunsama. See, I like these little ideas. So Sunsama, Sunsama.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. If you have a magic stick, what are 3 things you would change in the world right now?
Oh my gosh. The first one I know is hate, or like just all the hate that's there in the world. The second, these are all going to sound combined, but jealousy, hate, and evil. I don't know. They all sound exactly the same, but they're intertwined.
And the last question, which I ask everybody, and it could be business or personal. So what is one subscription you can't live without?
Whatever is on my TV. But it's not one, but like just in general, just watching shows.
So like Netflix or whatever.
Like
something that
but I don't know which one because they're all, we have every subscription in the world, but something that just gives me downtime. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. All right. So how can people reach out to you? How do you get more information? I know you wanted to offer something to the audience. I think you called it a free resource. So why don't you go over that? Contact information, how people can get a hold of you, and the free resource.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, best way is just all things Life is Organized, lifeisorganized.com, Life is Organized on Facebook, Instagram. I'm really active on LinkedIn, which is actually under my name though, Mridu Parikh. So you'll have to look that up in the show notes. But I'd love for you to come over. If you want to keep connecting, come on over to lifeisorganized.com/focus and I have a resource there called 5 Easy Ways to Get Focused in 5 Minutes.
Got it. Any final words before we end this podcast?
No, I just want to thank you so much for having me. I know, well, as a podcast listeners also, if you're interested in this type of like conversation, that I do have a podcast called Productivity on Purpose, specifically for business owners. So, but I know, Len, how much work this takes. I just appreciate you, getting all these messages out to the world.
Well, I appreciate you. I thought it was a very productive podcast in that sense. We discussed a lot of things, and guys, you're overwhelmed. Practice is tough. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and just don't enjoy going to work. I was fortunate. I didn't have those problems. I woke up every morning excited to go to work because I knew what I was doing every day. And, I have always been efficient in my time and delegation. I think it's really important to being a business owner. So if you can use her services, please reach out to her. She gave the information. You can check her out online, get her a free resource. And check her out. If you like the episode, please share it. Please tell everybody about it. Please put it in your social. Please review us. Please like us. Do everything you can to promote the podcast because I don't really do a lot of that. I rely on word of mouth to get my podcast out there. And as I always end my webinars, my podcasts, remember, Your reputation matters. Until the next episode, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Bye. Thank you.